back to another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. This week, we had a chance to talk to renowned lacrosse coach Dave Cottle from Maryland. Dave was the former coach at Maryland, the head coach at Loyola, a long career in the MLL with the Chesapeake Bay Bayhawks, and just kind of a renowned lacrosse aficionado. Dave's going to talk about a variety of subjects, including being a consultant for Marquette, trying to help them get off the ground, and a little bit about his consulting program and what he's doing now. I think it's a pretty interesting interview. We get a chance to talk to Dave about the 1-4-1, kind of an offense that he made quite popular, and we'll do that in a couple of seconds. I wanted to tip a hat to Steve Kerr from USA Lacrosse. Steve sent me a hat and a sweatshirt the other day from watching the show, and I just wanted to thank him. If you want to check out all the USA Lacrosse gear, right next to me here is the website information. The hat and the sweatshirt were pretty cool, so I want to thank to Steve. So everybody stay tuned. We'll be back with Dave Cottle in just a second. Welcome back to another edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. We are lucky enough to have with us today Dave Cottle, a veteran of all kinds of NCAA lacrosse battles and certainly professionally coach in the MLL. And Dave, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak to us here at the Michigan Lacrosse Review. And I look forward to a conversation about your background and your history and quite a few questions to ask.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for asking.
First we always start with the easiest question in the world. You started all the way back at Northern High School. When was lacrosse introduced to you?
I didn't start playing lacrosse till my junior year in high school. The football coach was also the lacrosse coach, and he said if I wanted to play quarterback, then I had to play lacrosse. So I gave up baseball, played baseball in 10th grade, and moved over to lacrosse. You know, my coach was a good man and cared about him deeply, and his name was Lon Russ, and so I became a lacrosse player.
Was it helpful to be growing up in Baltimore, where lacrosse was not a stranger like it might have been all those years ago in other places?
Yeah, I was fortunate too. We had some neighborhood guys that played lacrosse, and they kind of, you know, when I decided to play, they kind of took me underneath their wing and tried to show me how to do it.
What did you like about the sport at first? Was it the idea to play quarterback, or was it one of those things you fell in love with?
It was definitely to play quarterback, you know, to play football. I liked them all. I liked lacrosse. I liked football. And probably my favorite was basketball. And to me, lacrosse was very similar to basketball. You know, the picks and the moving and the screening and how you played. So it became, once my stick work skills became a little better, it became pretty easy to pick up.
You play attack?
I did.
Why are quarterbacks, and I say that as a former quarterback, why are quarterbacks usually turned out to be good coaches? Maybe it's all a film or just the semi-process of understanding.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, you know, they have to know what everybody does on every play. You know, it's probably why catchers make good managers too, you know, because they're calling balls and strikes, they're calling pitches, they're calling pitch outs. It just seems to me that they welcome added responsibility.
Yeah. Well, after a successful career, you go off to Salisbury State. Were they a Division II program at the time, or Division III?
No, it was actually when I played on the first Salisbury intercollegiate team.
Okay.
Andy Jones took over, and it was a club, and they won intercollegiate. And back then, it was Division II, III. So Towson, UMBC, they were Division II, and then Salisbury and a bunch of others. We played Hobart. We were Division III. So it was Washington College was a factor back then. So we played a lot of. The championship was known as Division II, III.
You must have been a pretty good player because you ended up making All-American, I believe, three times.
Well, you know, I think I got better. I had good coaching. I had good teammates, and I enjoyed the game, and I was willing to work at it. And I think we got a lot better.
What was your major at Salisbury?
I was a phys ed major.
So you wanted to teach. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, the most important role model besides my father in my life was my coach, Lon Russ, the guy I played football and lacrosse for, and he was a phys ed instructor. And so that seemed like something I would be interested in doing.
Football in college wasn't a choice, or wasn't an opportunity, or you wanted to stay with lacrosse?
I could have, you know, I got recruited out of high school, but decided to go to Salisbury to play lacrosse. and then contemplated playing football and wound up coaching in basketball while I was at Salisbury when I was working on my master's. And so, but I liked football, but lacrosse became my true love.
When did you figure out in college you wanted to be a coach?
I kind of, I knew early, by the time I was a junior, I was doing student teaching and the different things you have to do as an instructor. And it was something that I enjoyed doing.
Yeah. So from college, when did you take your first job was as a grad assistant or an assistant at Salisbury? Am I correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I stayed along after I graduated, and there was a couple of coaching changes at Salisbury at that time. And in fact, I think Dr. Crawford, I was just graduating. He asked me if I wanted to be the coach at Salisbury. And I said, Dr. Crawford, I'd love to be the coach at Salisbury. I'm not ready for that. I'm 23 years old. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so luckily I stayed on to be assistant for a couple of years and then went to Severn School in Anne Arundel County and wound up being an assistant football, head basketball, and head lacrosse coach.
So now you're ingrained as a teacher, you're coaching there. What makes the determination to go back? Because I got to assume that the position was less money than being a teacher at that point.
Yeah, I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade phys ed. I taught 9th grade health, and then I coached those 3 sports. So, it was first opportunity to kind of, call your own plays and or be the do it yourself, be the head coach. And so I enjoyed my 2 years at Severn immensely. We had really good athletes, really good teams, and we were very successful.
Maybe explain when we grew up, because I think you and I are probably in the same age group in our 60s. Explain why, or what your thought is as to why there are no more multiple sport coaches today.
Well, you wind up, in high school, you still see guys that are doing multiple sports, but in college, I think the closest thing was Navy. Navy for years had guys that were like boxing instructors and coaches. They did more than one thing. Richie Meade was one. He taught boxing. Mark Goers right now is at director of ops at Navy, and he teaches combat training. So, but I think that's really the only place they have it now. And I guess that, it became just like everyone pushed for kids to play one sport, coaches to coach one sport. And I remember Bruce Arena was the assistant lacrosse coach in Virginia and head soccer coach. And then he won a couple national championships in soccer, became USA coached professionally. But back in the 70s, there was still that kind of guy.
Rarely in high school do you see coaches that coach more than one sport. A lot of that, I think, has to do with, athletic directors having the expectation that they run an off-season program. If you're coaching more than one team, you don't get paid for all the work you do with the other 10 months of the year, but you're expected as part of that contract to do that. So maybe that has something to do with that process. It's too bad because I think as a multiple sport athlete benefits from different sports, coaches, you said earlier you coached basketball. Well, I'm guessing with all your background in the 1-4-1, basketball had to play into some of the techniques and thoughts and formations and patterns that you later used at Loyola and certainly at Maryland.
Well, it's funny because I found basketball was very difficult to coach in comparison to lacrosse, because in lacrosse we get to catch our breath after every goal and let things go through our head. In basketball, you got to get it in bounds and run it down the court quick. And so I think that basketball was a sport by coaching it that helped me become a better lacrosse coach.
Now you took over in '83 at Loyola.
Yeah, Loyola. Jay Connor had been there for a long time. He was a part-time coach, and I became the first full-time coach at Loyola College.
Compare Loyola today with Charlie Toomey compared to what you took over. Are they similar programs on a national scale? I understand the sport's growing, but Loyola had some good teams even in those days.
Well, we had some terrific team. We got better as it went along. But I would say when I started at Loyola 3 years before, they had lost 31-3 to Washington College. And so You know, the first year I think we were 5-9, and then from then on we put together a couple winning seasons in a row, 17 or 18 of them. And we got better. But, you know, we played on a baseball diamond. There was a pitcher's mound in the middle of the field. You know, then they curly field, they put a turf on, and each year they did their best to make the place better and better. And I think the biggest difference with Loyola is, you know, the facility they have now. We were lacking in facilities for years. We did the best we could, and when they made the commitment to get the facility, I think it really helped their program.
When you went there, this lacrosse was not really a national sport like it is even in the last 15 years. Your recruiting, I'm assuming, stayed, you know, in the area, the Baltimore area, along, you know, East Coast. I can't imagine you spending a whole lot of time. You look at their roster now, and it's got kids from everywhere.
Well, it started off, I think our first really good team was in 1988. I think we had 8 Coward Hall kids. You know, so the first thing we had to do was get some of the local kids to stay at home. Once we got the local kids that were good players, you know, a Brian Kronberger or Chris Colbeck, that were really good players, then we could start to recruit nationally. And one of the biggest advantages we went up having at Loyola had really, really good dorms, you know, apartment living dorms. And we ran top 205, Tony Seaman, Billy Tierney, and I at Loyola College. And so we got those kids on campus to see the dorms, and that allowed us to start recruiting nationally. That's where we got Paul Canabine, who became one of the best face-off guys in college and in pro, and Jimmy Blanding from West Genesee. So it allowed us to start recruit nationally. And I think top 205 contributed a great deal to the success of Loyola.
Was 1990 the only undefeated year you had as a coach at the collegiate level?
Well, 90, I don't think we were undefeated. I think 99,
Okay.
88, we were undefeated in the regular season. 99, we were undefeated in the regular season. We lost in the playoff both times. 90 was the year we went to the finals against Syracuse with the Maricheks and the Gates.
That's right.
So 88 was the first year we made it to the playoffs. 89, we had I think we might have only lost one game or in 89, and then 90 we had a team where we had good seniors, and we beat Rutgers in the quarters, and then beat Yale in the semis, and then played Syracuse in the finals, and got kind of beat up pretty good there.
Was the 94 win over, and correct me if I'm wrong, but over Hopkins 17-15, was that the signature win because you're beating somebody from across town?
Well, it's funny, you know, they used to call that game the Charles Street Massacre. And so I think the records was 35-1. And we had an athletic director named Joe Boylan and Hopkins Bob Scott. They were very good friends. And so they brought that game back in 1993. And we played in a rainy day at Johns Hopkins, and they beat us 16-12, something like that, 17-11. And so the second year we played was at Loyola, and that was that 17-15 game. And so that was a significant win to our institution, a significant win to our program, and really a significant win to one of the most incredible men I've ever met in my life, Father Sellinger, who was the president of Loyola. When he hired me in '83, he says, I want to beat Hopkins. I said, well, Father, you're going to have to put a lot more money into this, and you're going to have to pay a lot of coaches in order for that to happen. And each year they gave us more and more support. We finally got it done in 1994.
Not that it matters, but you had what, 19 seasons at Loyola?
19, yep.
Are you a good Catholic boy?
I became a much better one as I got older.
I ask that question of Kevin all the time at Notre Dame, Kevin Corrigan. You know, how often he goes to mass. At Notre Dame, you actually have rectories right in the dorms, you know.
Yeah. And
it becomes a little less, you can't sneak out the back door as much. I think that's, you know, kind of one of those things. I don't want to bring the thought that you're the inventor of the 141, but you certainly have had as much to do with its development and its publicity as anybody. Did your love of the 141 start at Loyola?
It did. It was kind of out of necessity, because what we were able to do is we were kind of a one-handed team, And so we were able to put our righties in one alley, our lefties in the other alley. And we kept making changes and adjustments. I know back in the 80s, the Mumbo play that kind of came out, Henry Ciccarone, who was our assistant at Loyola at the time. And we had Dave Huntley and Stephen Way and all that. And Henry came up with, well, if we cut the wing through and then bring the far side crease under, he goes, if they slide early, and so teams were just getting into the sliding thing then it would work, and it did. The better you were coached on defense, the more open the Mumbo was. And then it morphed into the double Mumbo and, outside screening for inside. And it was just, and that was out of the 1-4. So we did do a bunch of different things out of the 1-4.
Where'd you come up with the term Mumbo? Just curious.
It's a true story. The kids, there was a young lady on campus who had a name very similar, and they wanted to name it after her. And I told them, we're not going to call out a name of a young lady on the field. So it went from something similar to Mumbo. And then it's amazing to me when you hear Mumbo Stick, and the way it's talked about in the lacrosse world, like it's a term. But that's exactly where the term came from.
Dave, I still hear centermen, midfielders calling Mumbo. I still hear him call the name out during high school games. So
pros. I mean, we're coaching in the MLL, they're watch for the Mumbo, and and it's just some different ways. And it's like the 1-4-1. When we started the 1-4-1 or started using the 1-4-1, we dodged out top. At the end, we used it to invert a lot of the time. So it's, and now you're seeing guys use it as wing dodges. So it gives you good spacing. If, teams that slide to you, it's used really to combat teams that slide to you because the spacing's so good and they really have a long way to cover up inside.
There's a lot of triangle offense from basketball that they used with the Lakers. They used obviously with Jordan and some of those guys. If somebody slides, then somebody's got to be open. I mean, it's not hard to figure that out, and it's a pretty simple process. Where'd you come across it the first time? Was something you thought about, or was it actually an offense used that you sort of, kind of sophisticated it a little bit?
I thought Chris Colbeck, when he was at University of Virginia, he assisted there about 5 years, and they kept playing Princeton in the finals. And so what it did was simplify, Billy back then had, he was the leader of the multiple defenses and everything like that, but it really simplified what Princeton could do to them. And so I thought it was, and then we kind of took some of the things that we saw and then put our own stamp on it.
You had a great career at Loyola. At the end of '99, you start looking, I guess I'm looking around for another job. You had a pretty good team into that NCAA finals. I think you were, one of the top seeded teams. What was the exit from Loyola, and how did you end up in Maryland?
Well, Loyola was, 99 was probably the best team I think I coached at, 98, 99. We went to the Final Four in 98, lost to Maryland in 99. We felt like we were the only undefeated team in the regular season. And at that time, we wound up getting a draw, where some years you hang in there, you get good draws, and other years you didn't. We wound up having to play the winner of Princeton, Syracuse at Princeton. And Syracuse upset Princeton. We were the 1 seed and the only undefeated team. And we played Syracuse on a rainy day at Princeton with the grass being long, and we played a lot of zone. And they would throw it inside, and the ball would roll to the sideline but not go out of bounds. And so they kind of wore us down a little bit on that. It was a high-scoring game, and Syracuse went on to win the championship. No, I take it back. They lost to Virginia, won the championship that year. But that was a tough beat because we felt like going into it, that was the best team. We could score. We had really good players, and we just didn't, we didn't play our best game at the most important time.
I just briefly, you mentioned Dave Huntley. We had an interview lately. I'm a Canadian guy who grew up as a box player, but my question to you is, he was certainly part of the glue that the Canadians relied on. And I'm not sure they've ever recovered from since he's gone. Is that a fair estimation from you, looking on the outside in?
Well, you're talking about my first we didn't have full-time assistants at Loyola. My first graduate assistants were Dave Huntley, Steve Way. And
my
so
God.
Dave Huntley was one of the most, he was getting his master's, he was working and he was coaching and he was just, so, David, if to know David is to love David, because David, you were either great or you sucked. And you could do both in the same week, or the same game. And so, but the kids loved David. He was a competitor. He was brilliant. He was really bright, and he grew. He was always a good man, but he grew as a coach and found his own way. And I think he was. The Canadians look at the World Games. They looked at the quarterfinal game or the semi when they played U.S. a lot different than the U.S. did. The one year I was assistant under Tony Seaman, we're playing it one way and they're playing it. They didn't care if they lost. They were going to try to get underneath our skin. They were going to try to do some other things that, find out if it worked. And we were, hopefully building up to win a gold medal on that. But, David to this day is, what happened between the lines when you're coaching against them was one thing, but when it was over, that you knew you were going to be able to sit down and talk about what happened. And I miss Coach Huntley.
I just don't think they've recovered. I talked to Randy Mearns last year, and Randy's involved with the Canadian team, and it is one of those things. So we were fortunate enough to be a part of that process. How did Maryland show up on the map? Where did that come from?
Well, Coach Adele got sick. He had to do it. And, I applied for the job and, when it came, eventually, there were a bunch of people that pulled out and then they, I was right down the street and I wanted to try a bigger school, just to see what happened. And, went from a small school who I loved but at that time I grew up a Maryland fan, watching Maryland basketball, rooting for Maryland football. And I said, whether it works or it doesn't work, I'm going to try to give this a try. And I got to meet some of the best people and the best players and the guys that played for us. They were tremendous human beings. And I was very fortunate. And I quite honestly enjoyed the time I was there.
Were they in the ECAC when you were there? Because they're in the Big Ten now.
No.
What were you guys in?
They were in the ACC. Yeah, the
Okay.
ACC. And, that was a change because at Loyola, you weren't in a league. You played independent schedule. You played Hopkins and you played Carolina or you played Duke and all but to be in that league, the level of intensity for league games, it was something that kind of caught me by surprise, how these kids just get up for these ACC games. They were always ready to play them. It was an intense battle and it was great coaching. And it was only a 4-team league, I think, at that time. So you saw each other 2 or 3 times, and then you had the ACC tournament. And, so it was very competitive, very tough to play, and it got you battle ready.
From a coaching perspective, they moved to the Big Ten. You think that's a good move for the university?
I think it's a great move for the university financially. The Big Ten network kind of took them from losing $5 million a year to making $13 million a year. And it allowed them to enhance their facilities. It allowed them to pay the coaches more. It allowed them to grow as an institution. So I think financially it was something that I don't think anybody can, there could be no denying it was the right move. What as a true Maryland fan and guys for the 20 years before, you miss those ACC rivalries. The Maryland Duke basketball games, the Maryland North Carolina basketballs, Maryland Virginia. And so I don't think Maryland's ever gotten over that. I mean, they're in the Big Ten, but there's just still this whole area still remembers Maryland as an ACC school.
As a coach, you're in an independent Loyola and you're trying to make it to the dance. You made it there as a Loyola head coach. Is it easier to coach in a league that has an automatic qualifier versus one who doesn't? Is there more pressure to win without being in a league?
Well, we were in the league in the ACC, but we didn't have enough schools. So even though the champion would get in, we weren't an automatic qualifier in the ACC.
Okay.
I think it just gives you another bite of the apple. you know, and what happens is at the tournament time, if you are an automatic qualifier, you could have a bad regular season and still get in if you win the tournament. If you're in a league that doesn't have that, then your regular season speaks for you. And so again, it gives you more opportunities.
You won 65% of your games at Maryland, which is a pretty unbelievable tribute to the level of the tournament play and the regular season play you guys had. What was the exodus to leave Maryland?
Well, I was told by the AD that we probably had to go to the Final Four in order to. Then we had a very good season. We're a sophomore-oriented team, but we lost to Notre Dame in the playoffs, and I think I forget what it was, 9-7, and we just didn't win enough games. We were 12-4 that last year with wins over Hopkins, Duke, and North Carolina, but at the same time, I knew we didn't win enough games, and that's the way it was.
Dave, when you're approached that way by the athletic administrator, does it change the way you coach, or do you just go about your business and hope that what you normally do? Is there something different that goes on? I mean, the pressure's greater, but do you actually change the way you would approach something?
Nah, I didn't. I didn't tell the kids, I didn't think it was fair if the kids knew that, if, that every game had pressure on it. And again, like I say, when you beat Hopkins, you beat North Carolina, you beat Duke, you had a successful season. We just didn't get to the Final Four, and that was what she wanted to do. And she had that right. And she made that decision. And, it was, lacrosse is what lacrosse is what we do. It's not who we are.
Right.
And so moved on to the MLL next.
I asked that question because Rich Kimball is one of our high school coaches who was actually the Michigan State coach when they were a Division I program. And the athletic director told Rich 2 days before the season was going to start that at the end of the season, there wouldn't be a program. Well, he'd recruited kids from all over the place, and he didn't want his kids not to know what was true, because at that point they could have transferred out, which some of them did. And like he said, there's not much you can do when somebody lowers the boom. It's heartbreaking. But it's, you sort of got to go around your business and, kind of go from there. So from college to the pros, not too far down the street, Chesapeake Bayhawks. You were with them for how many years?
I think in 2011, Brendan Kelly asked me to come aboard as an advisor, a consultant. I did the first year, and then on the championship weekend, I wound up being on the sideline when our owner was the head coach. He had taken over the reins of a head coach, and that championship weekend, it was at Annapolis, as a matter of fact. And Brendan Kelly with the Bayhawks won, so we enjoyed some success. The Bayhawks enjoyed success that year with Brendan taking over. He invested his money into it, and his time and his effort, and we had some really good players that year. We wound up winning, and I believe it was 2010 or 11. 2011 it was. And then the next year I was an assistant coach to Brendan Kelly in 2012. And then in 2013, I became the head coach, and 13 and 14, 13 to like 17 or 18, took a year off. And Brian Reese became the head coach. And then I came back and I coached one more year the last year, which was, I think, 2019.
Talk about what it's like to be a professional coach and not making a sustainable living as a coach. And I say that is that there's all kinds of people who think you can make all kinds of money as a professional lacrosse player. And that just wasn't real accurate. I don't think it's gotten better.
Well, I got involved on the business side. So I had sponsorship duties. I had, ticket sales duties. I had, personnel managing duties, and then coaching and GM on the side. So I kind of did a little bit of everything. So that was my only job that I had. And so, and then when I stopped coaching, I was just a GM and then help run the business side of it too. So I learned a lot about the business side. I think that's helping us today with Legendary Sports Group, who's a company that when the Bayhawks went away, we're an event operations company, and we do different championships, different events, different tournaments. But I think that the MLL was, you'd play on Saturday. You could, you're used to college to fixing things on Monday, and you didn't fix things on Monday. You talked about things Monday through Thursday, but your first practice was Friday. And if you spent everything all the time on what happened last week, then you probably didn't have time to prepare and get them ready for the next week. So that was the difficult. Tony Resch was got him, he was a veteran, a great coach, a great man. And I learned a lot from him in this MLO. I said, we got to fix this. He goes, Dave, we can't fix this. We got to get ready for the next one. And I think what the limits on practice, the limits on the hours, the limits on the film, you began to trust the players a little bit more than you did in college. You didn't micromanage as much because of the lack of time that you had, and you just had to get them ready. And we had some great players with some great locker rooms, some great chemistry, and really some of the best players that ever played in the history of college lacrosse and pro lacrosse. We were fortunate enough to have on our team.
Did you learn anything as a coach, coaching all those years in the PLL that you may have not? There's something different up there that you didn't understand maybe at the college level?
I would think, it's funny. I had dinner with Jimmy Stagnita last week, and, Jimmy's another guy who's figured this pro thing out. And we talked about it, allowing our players to own the season is probably the thing I learned, before they, when you're in college, maybe early, they did it because we forced them to do it. In the pro league, if you got the right players, your job was to help them get to what they wanted to do. And it was strictly player driven. It was player central. And in college, it was coach central. And I think that's changed today. I think the college coaches today, you look at this great job as John Tillman is doing at Maryland. It's very player centric, and they're doing, and I think it works better that way.
Do you think you could use that sort of mature approach with high school kids?
I think you can. I think you have to see, to me, you have to have rules, and I'm not talking about rules where your hair is or your,
Right.
talking about rules on the field so that when things break down, you go back to your rules. And I think if you have a set of rules systematically, offense, defensively on the field, and then with that is, you get a group of guys to buy into a common goal, and you motivate them on a daily and weekly basis, or help motivate them. Yes, I think you can be successful in the high school level.
The PLL is now sort of, with the NLL, has made that arrangement so you can now play both seasons. The way the schedules run, you're able to play indoor, you're still be able to play the traveling model that is the PLL. You see that as an improvement? I mean, obviously last year they brought Boston back, so they get a little more continuity with familiarity for communities. And I just saw that they today released their schedule, first half of their schedule. And can they coexist, or do you see it having to go back to a sort of a town approach to things, where you're from Detroit, you're from Baltimore, you're from, Long Island and those kinds of places?
Well, being involved in the business side, I don't think the traveling road show is going to work long term, and I don't think it has worked from a financial situation. I think every pro league has been in lacrosse has been hemorrhaging cash because they don't sell enough tickets,
Right?
And they don't have enough ticket revenue. I think the biggest problem that professional lacrosse has is they need more people to buy tickets, because if you get ticket revenue to go with, and they can get the sponsorship revenue, they possibly can get, a TV deal and everything like that. But if you don't get the ticket revenue, then it's tough to make the ends meet and to make a profit on it. And I think that the best way to do it as an owner of the league, if you can get men to, great business owners to take over a franchise like the NLL has done, I think that's the way to be successful. And I think they know that. I think they're moving in that direction. I think they had to do it this way to get started, because they didn't have venues. There was some competition from the MLO, had some of the venues. I think they've had a plan, and I think they'll go there pretty shortly.
I see that NBC obviously has passed on the PLL. ESPN is offering them, at least rumors have it, something about a third of what was being offered at NBC. So the money isn't there, because obviously they never met some of the standards in terms of attendance and all the rest of it that goes with that package. But I think the guys in the NLL are smart, because I think one of the things they're doing is recognizing you can be successful in a small pond and be happy and be very successful, because you can't compete with the guy sitting above you, because there's just not the interest that there might be. And I think that's one of the things I think eventually the PLL is going to have to learn.
Well, I think they know. I think they know the shortfalls and the shortcomings of what they're doing. I think it's been the hand they've been dealt, and I think eventually they'll move to where it is. The NLL has been impressive, though. Their business model seems to be working.
It does.
And they're getting 6,000 to 10,000 people paid at their games. And and maybe it's because of where they're located, and there's not a lot to do in the cold weather at that time, and place to go. And in the, I'm not sure whether the summer's the best time for the league, for the outdoor league, but I don't know when other time is, because in lacrosse, competing with college isn't going to work. We tried that one year at the MLL. We got destroyed early season while the colleges were, maybe it's a fall thing. I don't know. But right now it's the best they have is the summer, and they've gone a little later. They've gone into September now and everything like that. So again, I think they got smart guys running the PLL. I think they'll figure it out. But the same problems that started with the MLL in 2000 to where it is, the PLL today, is you need more people to pay for tickets.
Yeah. The company line, even when we're watching the finals last year, the company line is we got a filled stadium, and you can see just by watching the camera and in your television that it's about 3/4 full, and a lot of those were giveaways. Hopefully they'll find a model and kind of make it work. So let's hope that happens. Last couple questions. We've been in December of 2010, we interviewed Joe Amplo to open our third season. You were part of the Marquette program as a consultant. We were fortunate enough to interview Joe Amplo to start the season this year for our program. Joe Amplo, John Danowski, and Seth Tierney, and all three of those guys are the national team coaches. And Joe was nice enough to give me your phone number, so I appreciate that talking to us. But what was it like being a consultant for Marquette? And obviously your Loyola background has some play in that, because it's a Catholic school to a Catholic school. So talk about the sort of the hands you had in Marquette's rise to success so early.
Well, it's funny. There was a local alum who reached out to me from Marquette and said they're going to add lacrosse, and I've recommended that they reach out to you. And so I talked to the assistant AD at the time, or a couple of the assistant ADs, and they reached out and they asked us. There were some people they wanted. So what we wound up doing was we did the search. They would let me know who had applied, and then we would go through the candidates, and then we set up interviews in Annapolis, Maryland. So the Marquette assistant ADs came into town, and then we set up, and they had some great candidates. And in fact, there was another gentleman who was probably the favorite going in that I thought that they were going to hire. They looked like they wanted an offensive guy. And then when the interviews were done, they knew they wanted Joe Amplo right away. I mean, it was the other guys were sensational, but Joe Amplo was the guy, because they felt like he would be part of their family. He would support the other coaches. He brought a passion to what he was doing. Joe just did a really good job interviewing. And Joe's a really good coach. And so, that then it became that once they saw the candidates, we got them the best. They told us what they wanted. We got them those candidates, and then the institution made a decision, and they chose the right guy.
I coach a club lacrosse team. We were always fortunate enough to play at Marquette down by the river on those fields. And it was one of the kind of unique places that you can play lacrosse at the collegiate level, next to the casino. So if you had a bad day at the fields, you could walk up the ramp and do a little betting. But it's a great university, much like the universities you've been involved with. But I think sometimes in the Midwest here, Marquette gets lost in its educational background because it's such a good school. I can say the same for the University of Detroit. Both the Catholic schools in both those towns are exemplary academic institutions. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the mix. But
You know, it's fun. It's funny because we also, you know, I also helped Marquette. I helped Furman, helped Mercer, helped Richmond. You know, so got involved with some of these, because, the one thing being involved in, you kind of know where the bodies are buried. And so you can kind of steer them in a direction that it's not that they wouldn't get a good guide. We made sure they couldn't make a mistake.
give me an example. And I mean, there's 1,000 things you could talk about, but as a consultant, what would you have to steer them away from? The kind of topic?
Well, maybe a guy that, just had gotten in previous trouble somewhere, or, maybe had, there were some issues that weren't public, that we all know goes on and maybe aren't reported on or anything like that. But again, it's their call, and I put all the facts out on the table for them, and then they make the decision, or made the decision. But, Marquette was as impressive as any group we dealt with. They knew what they wanted. Mike Broker was fantastic at the time, and Danielle was fantastic at the time, and they were all in. They couldn't, Furman was a little different because they got a great coach, but you could tell that, the money for lacrosse was, they got a big donation, but they had to find a way to find a way to pay for lacrosse. And it didn't seem like they had the stomach for all that. And you could see that probably was going to go the other way. And I thought Richmond hired a tremendous coach, and I think he's one of the best coaches in college lacrosse. I think Danny is an outstanding coach. And even Kyle Hannon at Mercer, I think Kyle's a great coach. He was a little known guy at Goucher, Division III coach, and he became an excellent coach. So I think all the universities made the right calls for them. They know what they need, and we just try to find them good candidates to look at.
Dave, is there a personal reward for being a consultant, knowing that you did it right?
Well, the personal, with Marquette, I got to know Joe better, and now Joe's at Navy in the county, so I get to see him. So you root for the teams that you help, and so yes, I think when Richmond went to the NCAA tournament, I felt, that felt good. When Joe was coach of the year and everything like that, at least we got the right people in front of the Marquette people, and they made the right decision.
Are you still connected to Marquette?
I'm not. I'm more connected to Joe than I am Marquette right now. And, because living in Annapolis and Navy, and, their AD's been good to us. We run a couple events at the Naval Academy, and Joe and John Orson, who played for us at the Bayhawks, are coaching there. So I'm kind of, I root for Loyola, I root for Maryland, I also root for Navy.
One of the parts of this program is we've interviewed, 20 or 25 PLO guys. We've interviewed almost every Division I legend coach, Bill Tierney, everybody else. It's really fun to talk to the young guys because they're coming from some tree. They're coming from your tree. They're coming from Bill Tierney's tree. They're coming, it's amazing that the connection between Joe and Danowski and in this case, Seth Tierney, that everybody knows everybody. So it's a fun fraternity from that standpoint, but it's also fun to watch them have success. Before you go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. Back in the day when, everybody, the staffs used to, we used to work at Top 205 and some of these other places, and you'd see who the good young coaches are. With COVID and how each program has kind of become insulated from other programs, they haven't had that opportunity. So you don't work with the other coaches on the field very often. So that's been a change, is watching. Used to know who the next great young coach was. It's harder to figure out now. And so I think that's been, and I also think because, when a guy used to make a commitment, you didn't recruit his guys, so it's a little more dog eat dog than it used to be, and I don't know if that's better or worse, but you knew it was coming.
Well, if you don't win, you don't keep your job. That has maybe something to do with that. So, I mean, that's nothing against it, but unless you're winning and putting bodies in seats, even with the facilities, Ohio State just came across with some of the renderings from their new facility. And of course, it had to be slightly nicer than Michigan's because there was, just the public relations value of it. Do me a favor real quick. Talk about the organization you're in right now, because I think it's doing a great job on the East Coast. And I want to follow up by saying you guys do a lot of tournaments. One of the discussions we've been having is through this pandemic, kids seem to want to play, but they don't seem to want to practice. How is a group like yours able to sort of bridge that gap? Because that's a fair stipend, fair idea from the other, kids just don't want to practice right now. They just don't.
Well, it's funny, the last 2 years I coached a 22 team with Tom Ripley. He was the head coach, and I helped him out. And we were, quite honestly, I think we're the best 22 team in the country by far. I think we won for the last 2 years every tournament that we participated in. We practiced, and we sold them that the club business is is a me business. And we wanted to turn it to a we business, and Tom being the leader and the head coach and everything like that. So, we practiced, and we treated it, we practiced like a college team, because we wanted to make it easier for the players when they get to college in their first year to be successful. If they know how hard they have to work, they know what it's like to get bitten on, they know what it is to take a licking and keep on ticking. And so we made that effort to do that. So I didn't see that, I saw just the opposite. Our guys were practicing, and we practiced hard, and we practiced for 2 hours or an hour and 45 minutes, but it was like a college practice with the pace of a college practice. And sometimes we ran. So in the circle I was in, I didn't see it. Now, our business is called Legendary Sports Group, and we run Naptown. Was a tournament that Matt Hogan and I invented on a napkin at lunch one day, and so we have other events. Last year was the first year we did the MIAA championship, lacrosse championships. And it was, I think at one time we had more people than the quarterfinals. We had over 11,000 people watch the Tuesday, Friday games. And so now they've come to us, and we're going to run the MIAA basketball championship, which February 27th. And so we're talking to another, a DC league about an event that's happening in March. So we're getting into we run some races, but most of it is lacrosse events. And then we started kind of a 5-star lacrosse, which is, for 2024's this year, 2025's next year, where we got the John Descos, the Donnie Zimmermans, the Billy DeWans, when Dave Petramala wasn't coaching, got them to work with the kids. And again, it's just the complete opposite. It was about practicing. It was about being asked to do things. It was about coaching the little details. And so those kids they got coached at 5-star. It wasn't roll out the balls and who's going to be the prettiest guy, because there were no college coaches there. So we're pushing it in another direction. We're trying to as a club coach, and we're trying to help the high schools become better, because if the club areas and the high school guys work together, then everybody's the winner.
Yeah.
When you look at the Annapolis Hawks, when we first started, a couple of teams we coached, the older teams, South River won 3 consecutive state titles. Then you had St. Mary's. When we had a lot of St. Mary's guys, St. Mary's won an MIA title. Last year, our 22 team had a lot of Spalding guys. And Spalding wound up losing in the finals to Boys Latin. And we had a Boys Latin player and a Loyola player. So it's just I see the opposite. But then again, we wouldn't allow that to happen, that they don't practice, because that's not what it's about.
I asked that because we're having a conversation. Soccer and hockey are club sports, great ones here that have really just overtaken the high school hockey and the high school soccer in terms of its importance. Your club team is much more important. We're kind of moving in that direction with club here. That somehow, they're promising lots of stuff that they don't necessarily deliver, but it is what it is. But the other question, this will be the last question. Brian Phipps, who's a goaltender in the PLL, who's also a local guy. The Catholic League in Baltimore plays with a shot clock. Now, our new face-off rule for high school is a stand-up face-off rule. I think we should follow more NCAA rules. And I'm just curious as to your thoughts on maybe a shot clock for high school.
Well, put it this way, and the MIA has the shot clock and follows college rules. What we do at our tournaments, if Naptown, the playoffs had shot clocks. 5-star, every game had a shot clock. So we believe in, and now we don't use the college rule shot clock. We use 60 seconds rather than 80 seconds. So we use the old MLL rule.
Right.
And so, because, the reset at the time was, it started at 80, then it reset at 80. We wanted more possession so kids got more reps, so kids would, have an opportunity to showcase themselves a little bit better. So that's one of the things we do. We run high-end tournaments with shot clocks.
Cool. Well, Dave, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated the conversation. This will go a long way to be part of our 4th year. And you've always been a bit of an idol because I've kind of used you as a tool for learning from all your DVDs and learning about the field game. So thanks for that, but thanks for just being a great and integral part of the success of lacrosse in the United States. Thank you.
Well, the pleasure's all mine, and I appreciate it. And it must be a slow day in the week when you ask me to talk, so that's okay. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Just wanted to say thank you to Dave Cottle for joining us here on the Michigan Lacrosse Review. A lot of insight with a lot of varied background. And it's amazing to me when people talk how many of the intersections that we have in the sport, one guy knows another, and Dave certainly proved that today. So thanks to him. And for all the guys in the back, we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next time.